Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Clemens, and this is U.S. History Flipped. Alrighty, rude folks, so we are talking about the road to revolution. So we're going to talk about the actions that led to America's Declaration of Independence. Oh, alright. So we care about the French and Indian War is because of the impacts that it had. So let's review really quickly. It's France versus Great Britain. And of course, we're going to fight on the side of Britain. Because we're kind of owned by them, so that makes sense. And Britain won. Yay! Oh, it's wonderful. Here's where we get to the really important part that we care about. It's the effects or the impacts. So one is that Britain gained a whole bunch of land. Basically, it's lost Canada. And, well, they're not happy about losing Canada. And so part of what is today the Midwest, that's along the Mississippi River. And so this is exciting. The colonists get all this new land. Yay! Oh, it's so wonderful. Except that Britain does this thing where they create this Proclamation Line, where they say that we could not cross that line that's set by Britain. We could not settle into this new area that we helped them to win. And so we're pretty upset about that because we're saying, hey, we fought and died and, you know, spent all this time doing this. How come we're not going to get to have some of this nifty new land? And also, the other thing that we really care about for this is that Britain says, oh my God, that was expensive. So what they do is they start some new taxes for the colonists, which they are not happy about. And just to kind of show you an idea of where the Proclamation Line of 1763 is, it's right along the Appalachian Mountains. So, I mean, in a physical geography kind of sense, yeah, it makes sense. Don't go past that. You know, it's all mountainous and crazy out there. Also, there aren't British troops out there to protect them against Native Americans or whatever else might be bothering them. So yeah, so now this whole area is all British. But the Americans can only stay in this darker gray area, which they're not happy about. All right, so what you guys are going to do is in your notes, we're going to talk about 6 different acts that were passed. And so what I'd like you to do is make a little chart in your notes where one column you have act, because there are going to be 6 acts. One column you're going to have what that action is, what they actually did with their act, how the colonists reacted to that, and then how the British reacted to our reaction. It sounds a little confusing, but once we get going, you'll totally get it. All right, so I wrote this again, just so you know where the columns are. You don't need to write it twice, unless you really want to write it twice. All right, so first we're going to start with the Navigation Acts, and they were passed really early on. And so remember, we talked about how England's economic system was mercantilism. And mercantilism, the whole idea is you're going to have colonies to benefit the mother country. Our mother country is Britain. So the Navigation Acts are part of that. These are laws that are passed to regulate trade with the colonies so that the colonies can only buy from Britain and they can only sell to Britain, and they're going to have a tax on sugar and molasses. All right, so the colonial reaction is, okay, Britain, yeah, I don't know how you're going to enforce this. We've got miles and miles and miles, thousands of miles of coastline. There are 3,000 miles between us and you. We could very easily go to Spain or to France or somewhere else and sell our goods. And they did. And they smuggled for well over 100 years. Some of our founding fathers were smugglers. They were lawbreakers. You might think that the British would be upset, but at this point they really aren't. There's this thing called salutary neglect, where the British had the laws on the books, but they didn't enforce them. So I like to equate it to, for example, it says in our school rules you're not allowed to wear flip-flops. Well, everybody wears flip-flops. There is no flip-flop police. There is no one that's coming around and saying, hey, you're wearing flip-flops. We wear them, I wear them, nothing happens to us. That's salutary neglect, where there's a law on the books, but it's not being enforced. So salutary neglect, nothing's happening with that. So our next one is the Sugar Act, and you'll never guess what they're taxing. Dude, it's sugar. And so this is where the change happens. This is after the French and Indian War. And so at first, the colonists are kind of like, okay, whatever, new tax, like we don't really care. and they keep smuggling, and they say we're not going to pay the tax. The thing is, now Britain has changed. They need the money. They're going to try to enforce it more. And so what they do is they start seizing colonists' goods without due process. And we're going to talk a lot about due process in here. Due process is basically maintaining the rights of the accused. You have a speedy trial. You're going to be charged with a crime. You're not just going to be thrown into jail. You're going to get an attorney, all those good things. So they're seizing goods without due process, which is not very nice. Thanks, Britain. All right, so again, I put the heading up here. You do not need to write it again. It's just to kind of help you to know what category, what column everything goes in. So our next one is the Stamp Act. Now, the Stamp Act is different. It's not a tax on a food product. It's a tax on legal documents. And some of the things that they would tax would be newspapers, wills, diplomas when you're graduating, pamphlets, all kinds of things. And so basically they're taxing the elite. Now the thing is, the elite, they kind of are readers and they know better and they're not very happy and they say this is violating their rights. And so the way that they react is they create something, an organization called the Sons of Liberty. And yes, it's led by a guy named Samuel Adams. Yes, he's a real guy. No, he didn't do beer. He hung out in a lot of taverns, so okay. And it's a secret organization. It's a secret organization in that it's supposed to, you know, who's a member is supposed to be secret and where they're meeting and when they're meeting is secret. But everyone had heard of the Sons of Liberty. People had a decent idea of who it was. The main thing that they're trying to do is keep it secret from the British, not necessarily secret from the colonists. The British reaction to this, because they're not very happy with secret organizations being created, is they cancel the Stamp Act. Yay! Oh, good job! And the colonists are feeling very excited, but they add in that, you know what, we can pass a tax anytime we want. And we say so because of the Declaratory Act. Which would be like me in class saying, yeah, guys, I'm passing a new rule saying that I get to make rules. So, enjoy that. It's kind of weird. Our next one is the Townshend Acts, and that's in 1767. So you see things are kind of progressing along every couple of years. And so this is a tax on lead, paint, glass, and tea. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Let's not talk about the tea. We'll hold on to that. But the lead, paint, and glass, these are all building materials. These are all really important. So here we have these brand new colonies where new settlers are coming in. They're needing to build stuff because there aren't as many settlements there, or there are settlements and they're trying to make them you know, be more formalized. And yeah, if you're taxing those essential building materials, it's going to be really difficult and expensive to do that, and they are not happy. So what these guys do is they start boycotting British goods and they start trying to make their own products here in America. They also spread anti-British propaganda, basically saying, you know, nasty stuff about the British and trying to get the other colonists on their side to say, hey, we need to do something about this. Come on, Britain. The British, they strike back, and they use blank search warrants. So if you think about it, a search warrant today has to be very specific. It has to have your exact name. It has to have the exact address of where they're searching. So if you, if they have your house at 123 Main Street and you're living at 125 Main Street, then they can't search 125 Main Street. They can only search 123 Main Street, and it has to be your residence. They can only search for what specifically they're looking for. They can't just go in and say, oh, we're searching for anything that could be illegal. It has to be very specific. And so basically you have British soldiers going from house to house looking for illicit materials, which is not nice. They do repeal all the acts except for the tax on tea. Oh my gosh, of course we're going to talk about the Tea Act. Again, guys, just because I love repeating myself, I just put these up here again to help you to know what the columns are. You do not need to write them again unless you're really feeling crazy. So now we have the Tea Act. So this is a tax on tea to bail out the British East India Company, which at this point Britain has a colony in India. They want to have the monopoly on tea. They want to be able to make as much money from the tea as possible. And so, yeah, they're going for it. Now, you might wonder why. Why is it so important that they're having a tax on tea? Like, who the heck cares? We're not huge tea drinkers today. Well, part of the reason why we're not huge tea drinkers is because of this, because we switched over to coffee with the American Revolution. Basically, the idea is if you want to have something that's safe to drink, you need to boil the water, and otherwise you've got the option of alcohol or tea. And so if you don't want to be drinking all the time, you're going to drink some tea. So the colonial reaction is the very famous Boston Tea Party. And we have this whole idea, you know, where it's these guys secretly going and dressed as Native Americans and dumping the tea. Here's the deal. Everyone knew that they were in costumes. No one thought it was really Native Americans. And of course, it's the Sons of Liberty that's doing this. The British reaction is something called the Intolerable Acts. Now, they don't name it the Intolerable Acts. That's bad branding. We call it the Intolerable Acts. So this is 1774. Now, again, for those of you guys who remember, I said there's only one date that I make you memorize, and that's 1776. So we're getting really close to 1776. So the Intolerable Acts, the reason why they're intolerable is they closed down Boston Harbor. Now, we talked about, in terms of geography, what the different colonies do to make money. And we said in the South, they're doing the crops and the plantations. In the North, it's trade. So if you're closing the harbor, it means they can't trade, which means they can't get supplies or make money. Not very cool. It also shuts down the Massachusetts colonial government that they elected, which they're very unhappy about. And they say, you guys are going to have to pay for the lost tea, which we're not very excited about. So what you end up having happen is the First Continental Congress, and Minutemen begin to train. The British reaction is the Quartering Act, and this is pretty substantial, where colonists are forced to keep British soldiers in their house. As a result, we once we get our independence and once we get our Constitution, and then once we get our Bill of Rights, this becomes the Third Amendment to the Constitution saying, nope, we're not doing this anymore. We also get the battles of Lexington and Concord. So good job writing this chart down. Yay! Alright, so let's talk about some other steps leading to the American Revolution. We have the Albany Plan of Union. Basically, what Benjamin Franklin said is, guys, hey, we're 3,000 miles away from the king. We've been functioning on our own. You know, we have things like, you know, from very early on, the Mayflower Compact. We've been doing New England town meetings. We have the Virginia House of Burgesses. By the way, all key 3 vocab words. And so he's saying, why don't we kind of get together and work together on some things? Poor Benjamin Franklin. Handsome man though he was, this was rejected. So sorry, Albany Plan of Union and Benjamin Franklin. Another thing that gets started, and this one's by Thomas Jefferson, is the Committees of Correspondence. And so the idea of this is a way for communications to go among the colonies. And so a whole network of patriots is started, where so one person might be in Boston and they're writing about the Boston Massacre, and they send letters on to other members of the Committees of Correspondence in New York and Philadelphia and Williamsburg and Savannah, so that everyone sort of knows what's going on. And yeah, it definitely, you know, these are biased reports, and they certainly shape public opinion against the British. So here's a picture of the Boston Massacre. They're massacring. Now, you do not need to write this last part, but we do end up having the First Continental Congress, where delegates from 12 out of the 13 states. Georgia does not come. Come on, Georgia. But they go, and this is the first time that they meet, and they're trying to talk about what's going on. Again, this is 2 years away from the Declaration of Independence, so they're not saying necessarily they want independence, but they do want things to be made right between the colonies and Britain. They're saying, hey, we have certain rights, come on, uphold them, and these are some of our complaints. And they're saying, come on, Britain, get on this, make things better. People are really, really afraid. And so what gets issued, and you don't need to write this because our running man isn't there, but they issue, the Second Continental Congress issues something called the Olive Branch Petition, where basically we say, my bad, Britain, like, let's get along, we love you, and we really shouldn't have fought, and please forgive us. And King George III kind of says, no, dude, you've gone way, way too far. And now you're going to be punished. And so kind of think of it like when you get to that point when you've messed up a couple times with your parents and then you do that really bad thing like crash their car and then they send you to military school. Yeah, that's kind of what King George was ready for. We do need to write this, though. So now we're at this kind of almost no turning back point where they're about to put the smack down sort of with us, and we have a choice to make. And like I said, there are a bunch of colonists, there are loyalists that, or Tories, they're also called, that are saying, this is a Boston problem. Britain's been a good mother nation to us. Things have really been great, and we need to chill. And you have these other people that are kind of on the fence. Common sense was meant for the fence sitters, and some of the loyalists and Tories. Writes this pamphlet called Common Sense, and he really tries to persuade people to fight for their independence, and he does. He changes a lot of people's opinion. This is the most widely read thing in the colonies. People that can't read are having people read it to them. It's a really, really big deal. And so there's a picture of that. And so as a result, guys, we end up getting the Declaration of Independence. And so we're going to be talking about a bunch about this in a little bit in class. But this is written by Thomas Jefferson. And yes, there's a lot of ideas from the Enlightenment. And the big guy that he takes ideas from is John Locke. Now, today we'd maybe say his ideas are plagiarized a little bit. Back then, they didn't see it like that. They were like, oh, everyone knows it's from John Locke. So John Locke originally said, everyone's born with natural rights that can't be taken away. Thomas Jefferson writes that same sort of thing in the Declaration. He says that those rights, John Locke says, that those rights are life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson changes it to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. John Locke says that if we are not given our natural rights, then we have the right to rebel. And Thomas Jefferson agrees with that. And so here's Thomas Jefferson, again, another hottie-toddy from history. He had red hair originally before he went gray, so obviously we like him. And here's a picture of the Declaration of Independence. And again, you see John Hancock's signature. He was first. Maybe he didn't realize that everyone else was going to sign smaller. Alright, guys, well, that's all for today. I hope you learned a bunch, and look forward to seeing you again.